Welcome back, Scott. Another week, another video.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
This week, I want to pick up your brain about something that is probably number one thing to take care of, and it's a mindset for success. Pretty much for anyone, but we're going to keep it for women predominantly. Uh, what's happening? What's influencing mindset? Is there some kind of common denominators that you think is good to be like a good starting place? And so on and so forth. I'll just give us some examples of my own experiences that more often than not, the peer pressure, either from your friends or social media, is pretty damn high. And more often than not, people just don't understand that what you see in social media is just not real.
No, absolutely not.
Like I can post my photos from today, flexing, and then someone sees me on the street and they will be like, "Oh, you don't look like that." I'm like, "Of course I don't." It's just not happening. So, I mean, you see all these fitness girls posing nice bikinis and adjusted their ankles and whatever else to make them look super attractive is not reality. So, do you want to open up about like understanding the mindset about learning how that can shift you towards either good or bad outcome?
I think the influence that people are getting, basically fed through social media, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess it depends how you look at it, everyone's living on their social media accounts for external validation, and it's it's all smoke and mirrors. So it's really a dangerous place to be searching all the time because what you're seeing is just not is it's just not true, and it's influencing people thinking that they should look a certain way, or they should be doing a certain type of training, or they should be taking a certain supplement. And I hear it from 100% of my clients when I first start working with them in some fashion, like either they think they should be taking this because their digestion is off, or they think they should be taking this because they might be getting closer to getting into menopause, or they think they should be trained this way because this girl with this set of glutes does. And I don't know what stems deeper than that prior to, my first conversations with them. Like, I don't know what else has been influencing them over the years, but the social media thing is literally giving them a set of lies that they're basically saying you need to do this, look this way, and it's just absolutely not the case. And I find with females, their emotions can really take over what is actually going on, and oftentimes their emotions make them feel a certain way, and then they react to that. And usually if they're not um, paying attention to the data, or they don't have someone in their corner to help them see through the noise, they're making adjustments in the wrong direction for their goal.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, in psychology, there is such things that you want it or not, truly feminine being. It can be a man, but majority of them are women. They just crave to be seen. That's why we have this explosive thing of OnlyFans taking over. It's like I get so much attention. Doesn't matter that it's weird attention, but I get a lot of attention. So, is there something that kind of can shift that mindset into kind of different behavior, instead of comparing yourself to something else? It's like, how do you even tell them that? Because majority of people will never acknowledge that they have this kind of thing. Like I
Mm.
talk to a lot of people, a lot of guys and a lot of girls, and I see things that they don't see. How do you get through to them to tell them, hey, you're probably focusing too much on your body weight or too much on how you look or we day-to-day basis or something like that? Is there anything that you can even do about it?
I have been doing a lot of research and work over the last little while now on mindset, and the mind, the power of the mind, neuroplasticity, and all these things. And I'm not an expert by any means, and I'm not qualified to be offering advice for this kind of stuff. But what I am learning from it, I find very invaluable. And what I use it for, it depends on the scenario. But with my clients, I'm just listening to them and looking at their data and their feedback. And when I see things of concern, I just address it in an indirect way because I don't want to come off as insulting. I don't want to come off as pretending to be an expert in this kind of stuff. But when I see my clients, and I do have a few that are very hyper focused on, for example, hitting their macro targets, I always reiterate the fact that, the nutritional label has an error margin. So if you are tracking, whatever, 150 grams of protein, 190 grams of carbs, and 45 grams of fat, and you try to constantly do that by scanning labels and fitting your macros, I explain to them that you'll never be perfect in theory because the error margin on the label is there. It's allowed to be there, and you can't avoid it. So I always bring that up, but I don't lean on it too hard. Instead, I try to refocus on something else. So if they're hyper focused on their body weight, which still, of course, it's a real thing. Even my clients that I've had for years that understand that if things go long enough and their weight hasn't done something they're expecting, they'll start to get discouraged, and you have to rein them back in, and you have to remind them. And it's with men too. It's absolutely with men as well, but usually with females, with that menstrual cycle, the hormonal shifts that happen. I mean, the hormones change their emotions, and your emotions dictate a lot of what's going on, even though that's largely coming back from your subconscious mindset. But what I'll do is I'll be like, okay, well, let's focus on the training. How is that going? So when we look at their spreadsheet, and then we'll say, okay, you lifted whatever, you were thrusting, 300 pounds for 8 reps. And then now you're doing 9 reps. Now you're doing 305 pounds for 8 reps, and now 12 reps, and you're slowly getting stronger. And we're constantly verifying techniques. So we know that the technique is still where we want it. So we know you're getting stronger. So if body weight hasn't really changed, but you have more muscle, you have to, by definition, then have less body fat on you. Otherwise, your scale weight would be showing something different. So I just try to redirect their attention from whatever it is that they're focused on, if I think it's a problem, or if I have any, minor concerns, just to remind them that there's other things that we can look for. Sometimes just the way their clothing fits is a very, very good indication of what's going on. You can't, I mean, unless you're intentionally shrinking your clothes in the dryer, your clothes are essentially the same. If they're fitting you differently, it's because your body is different. And sometimes I find that we just have to remind them there's other markers to check, and they will all make sense. And if you have one marker that's off, like scale weight, which is going to be the biggest variable measurement because we can influence it so easily, if the other ones line up, you have to think about this logically and bring it back down. And even though emotions can very, very well, very, very powerfully dictate what you're going to do, how you're feeling, etc. When you have the data, you have to be able to logically look at that and say, okay, I might be feeling this way. You can't say their feelings are lies, but their feelings don't their feelings aren't necessarily facts. So if you're feeling like you're holding water, or you're, fluffy, I hear all the times, but every metric that we measure says otherwise, you have to call a spade here. I understand that you're feeling that way, but you're still making the progress that we're looking for. So don't change what you're doing, because it's just going to be a temporary thing. It's just like a wave of an emotion. It's temporary. If you just wait it out, if you have all the facts in front of you, you're going to be fine. And I think it's important that we, or I, or whoever, or yourself, if you're looking, is you're paying attention to all of the details, not just what you're quote unquote feeling, because a lot of things can dictate your emotions and what you're feeling. And if you're basing all your decisions on that, you could be making the wrong decisions oftentimes. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, you mentioned that you have few people who are really hyper focused on body weight, few people really focused on macros and stuff like that. Is there a pattern, maybe their age, maybe how advanced they are in their training, maybe similar goals or something like that, that really, or influence from whatever they're looking at, that shifts them to be focused on that? Like I'll
Um,
give you an example. So I have quite a few guys who are just watching these celebrity workouts and hey, 15 minutes this and 20 minutes that. And I'm like, no, that person has been training for 20 years.
mm,
He didn't build anything in 15 minutes. And I can show you all the science, how you need to prepare your enzymes for it, and then prepare your body for it, and then line up all the habits and so on and so forth. Nothing's going to happen in 15 minutes. It's just not going to happen. So, have you noticed any patterns when you actually pull back and look at those people who are hyper focused on body weight or macros or something else, that maybe they have been influenced by same people that they follow on social media? Maybe they're from similar area where they live. Maybe gym setup is similar, or what's happening there? Is there anything that you can recognize and you can tell them, hey, maybe if we change this, your mindset might change?
I have noticed a lot of patterns, different ones. Age has definitely been one of them. I don't know if it's because of the social media, because it's all in front of us now, and I don't know, 20 years ago when I was the age of these people now, social media wasn't even a thing. So I can't really relate to their mindset now. But I see that 20-ish, 20s and early 30s mindset, especially if they're single, they seem to be largely more driven about how they look. And I mean, I guess everyone is looking for, external validation, and they feel that their worth is going to come from someone that they meet or something like that. I don't know. But I do find that the single people are largely more driven. I notice that if I'm working with clients that, and this happens quite often, I'm working with a client and they're in a relationship and the relationship is troubled, or they're splitting up, and now they have this extra motivation to look a certain way. I don't know if it's a distraction from what they're going through, or if it's now that they're back out on the market, they want to look a certain way because they want to have more options. Like I don't know. It's a lot of potential things here, but I definitely see that the younger people are largely driven by vanity, and the social media I think is a big part of that. And like you said, the OnlyFans and stuff like that. Um, but I've also noticed, how do I say this? I've also noticed certain people, their upbringing. Oftentimes, when I'm working with clients, I get to know them quite well, and sometimes you hear a lot of stories about their parents or their siblings had certain things and they were exposed to that, and people don't realize, but I mean, like, habits, they come on just by your environment oftentimes. I know that I worked with unfortunately a few teenage girls that were having eating disorder issues. One of them was actually hospitalized, and I'd have to work with their parents as well as whatever medical professionals were involved. And I remember the parents interviewed me essentially, um, before they hired me to work with their daughter. And I was listening to the mom, and the mom was explaining to me how she's a coach and she knows how this works and she understands this and this and this. And she kept explaining to me. I was just listening to her. She was interviewing me, but really I was totally hearing everything she was saying. And she mentioned a few times in the conversation that when she wants to adjust her weight a little bit, she just reduces her carbs and da da da. And lo and behold, her daughter was doing this because her daughter was probably watching this unfolding for years. And some of that stuff drives in pretty deep. I was actually just literally talking to one of my clients yesterday, and she mentioned being in an environment where her mom was doing a certain thing when she was at a certain age, and she started to do the same thing. So that can come from all different angles, I guess, different perspectives, but that's a very powerful driver there. I watch here around schools. I take my daughter's 14, and I've heard some of her friends at the age of 12 talking about how they want to lose some weight. And these are 12-year-old girls that are already like very, very small girls. And
And they
I've
need
been
a lot of
watching.
calories to just evolve.
Right, right, right. But because I try to be very observant and I'm a people watcher all the time, I've been watching through the years of us going to the same, like we walked them to school. I've watched these parents, and they're single moms, and they're single moms that are in a relationship and then they're not. And I watch their bodies morph, and it just so happens that their bodies are morphing when they're in a relationship and they're not. So they're literally just doing this, and their daughters are exposed to this. Um, I'm not saying that's the problem, but I do think that's a very, very relevant consideration. And that environment is more common than we think. And I think it's becoming even more common these days. And so oftentimes when I'm getting now a new client, sometimes it's literally just their current environment, but sometimes it's rooted very, very deep. And unfortunately, it always keeps stemming back to the same thing. They associate a certain body weight with a certain body image, and that is somehow driven into them quite deep. I mean, I even know with marketing and stuff like that, like the fitness industry is targeting females, and they put a lot of social pressure on them to look a certain way. And unfortunately, the pressure that they're putting on them to look a certain way is followed by gimmicks and advertisements that are not going to give them that. It's actually going to be the worst thing for them. But we just say, oh, you look that way, you must be doing that. And they're not. My experience so far, and this has been over 2 decades now, my experience so far, females in the fitness industry are under eating all the time. Females that are not in the fitness industry are overeating. And that's just the way I'm seeing this. And I don't know where the disconnect comes from there, but every time, maybe not every time, but 99% of the time, if I have a new female client that has not been in the fitness industry and she has a weight problem, it's an easy fix. She's been overeating, not a big deal. When I have a female coming from the fitness industry, she's been training hard and under eating, it's a lot different. There's a lot more rewiring, if you will, that has to take place because there's been so many adaptations that have occurred physiologically that we can't just continue to diet them down if they're trying to get leaner when they've been dieting down for the last 5 years. Like I'm literally working with a client right now that post show last year, her rebound was pretty bad. And she's dealing with all kinds of physiological problems right now, but she wants to be dieting down for a show again right now. We just can't. It's not going to work. The only way that would be successful is if we just, ride your body into the ground further and drug the shit out of you. And that's going to make for an even worse aftermath. So I refused to do it. And now we're going through the struggle back and forth of our check-ins are like, I'm miserable, I'm miserable, I'm miserable. And I'm trying to point out the positives, and they're there, but they're hyper focused on the obvious. The obvious is the scale weight and how they feel. The data is telling us otherwise, but they're not seeing that. So every time I point it out, they're like, okay, you're right, you're right, you're right. And then we get another week and then we redo the process. And I'm used to doing this. And over time, if they stick around, I'll win. I'll get them to follow through and they'll finally be like, oh, you're right. And here it goes. Now the momentum happens. But that initial first little while, sometimes it's a matter of months, sometimes it's a lot longer. It depends on what their history looks like and how much rewiring or adaptations we have to kind of reverse are we doing, because it definitely is a time consuming thing.
Yeah, outside influence is definitely a big thing, and like the way I look and the way I train is definitely influenced by Mariusz Pudzianowski. And I know a lot of people don't even know who that is. In my eyes, the best strongman there ever was because, well, he's still fighting in cage. Because he was looking great and he was ridiculously athletic. And I got the chance to see him live because in early 2000s they were doing strongman events in Latvia, and one of my friends, he was official photographer, so I saw him backstage, and dude, it's just insane that everyone got called out. And when he got called out, you could see everyone's face just drop because they knew we are here for a second place. There's just no chance we can beat this guy. And he was shredded, he was strong, six-pack year round, and never trying to do anything stupidly crazy. He was just all round kind of athletic. And that's what I've always strived to be. And I'm like, I think he's in the 50s now and he's still fighting in cage as a professional cage fighter. And I'm like, if I make the 50, I'll be happy. Never mind fighting as a professional fighter. I like to do this one thing, and I like to ask people, what influenced you to think the way you think? Like my dad always said, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. You know, and you often hear this saying that your peer group is extremely influential on you. And a lot of times people misunderstand it and they take it, I only need to be around good people, good influences. I like hanging around people who are drug addicts and those kind of things. I like to see what not to do.
Mm.
You know, but you need to kind of emotionally evolve to not be influenced by them. You know, every time I go out, there's a lot of friends, and majority of them still drink alcohol. And they're like, why don't you drink? And I'm like, I don't need to. I can have this fun without it. But you drink your alcohol, and every single time they try to convince me. And I can see that sometimes in past, I just went with it. Like when I was a teenager, I would go and drink something. And I never enjoyed it. I only did it because everyone else was doing it. And I'm like, yeah, I got all the friends around me. And now, similar with this, like, hey, I'm counting my macros because everyone else is doing that. And I'm going to hit my protein and then start educating everyone to get even more significance that, hey, look how much information I give you. But in reality, I'm hiding eating disorders that I'm not even aware of. So going
It,
from that, what do you see is you kind of lined up few things already, but do you see the mindset shift throughout the year? And is there differences between somebody who is competitive and just somebody who is only wanting to be healthy? Or do you see the extremes no matter what?
throughout the year where I live, you definitely see a change in people's morale a little bit, and it's almost certainly mostly related to just the climate change. Like I think it's this weekend. I think it's this weekend we move our clocks ahead another hour because now that it's going to be a little lighter out when you wake up, and it's going to stay a little lighter later on in the day, and that tends to get people outside more. Um, that has a big factor on this, I think, but it's multifactorial. Like it's not just being outside, which I think is important, but it's also the fact that you're outside means you're not sitting on your ass. So the fact that you're just moving is good. Like that cheesy saying, movement is medicine, is very true. But like everything else, the devil's in the dose. Um, like oftentimes when I don't want to get too off topic, but oftentimes when I'm working with, like I just did a back assessment on somebody 2 weeks ago, and they're like, oh, I'm doing all these things, I'm doing all these things, I'm doing things. I'm like, yeah, movement is great, but the movement you're doing is the problem. It's what's exacerbating the problem further. So there's obviously a dose response curve here, but definitely the climate change seems to boost morale to some people, and some people are more susceptible to others, like to the change than others. Um, but from the extreme mindset, I normally find that in not just in the athletes or in the fitness industry, but more in the, I don't know how to explain it. It's in the gen pop as well, but usually it's when they're coming from some sort of background of potential struggle of some sort. So they'll still have that extreme mindset. I don't think it's just driven strictly by the athletes. I think the athletes do have that to some degree for sure, but I've seen it in other places too. Um, when it comes to that external validation and that vanity sort of driven mindset, the Gen Pop people can be just as extreme with their thoughts and their obsessions. And I don't know where that stems from. Like I said, the psychology thing is not my field. Um, I feel I feel that I notice a lot of red flags all the time. And I think I know where they're stemming from, but I can't be certain. But I go by what my instinct. And I'm happy with the results I'm seeing with my thoughts on that kind of stuff. But I can't say that that's what's going on. But definitely there's a lot of concerning things I see. Like people, like you said, like everyone's doing this, so this should be normal. Like you see a lot of um younger women in their 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, even early 30s. I have to find my soulmate. I have to be a mom. I have to do these things. I don't know if they truly believe that, if that's a biological clock ticking, or if that's something that has been driven by external environments their whole lives. And I see a lot of young girls like in their 20s, maybe even their late teens, their whole focus is that. And they're doing whatever they think they need to do to attract that. And I honestly don't think that's how humans need to be. I believe generations and generations and generations ago, the idea of having somebody was almost necessary for survival. But at this point now, things have changed so much. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but it's still hardwired in. It's like with men, like we are always all of the stories and movies and things you're saying that you're supposed to be the hero, you're supposed to be rescue the girl, and she's your soulmate and she's going to make you whole. You're basically placing your potential happiness in someone else's hands, and I don't necessarily think that's the right thing. So when you see these women constantly doing whatever they think they need to be doing to find Mr. Right, I think that they're causing themselves a lot more potential issues than they even realize. And they're usually doing what everyone's doing. And usually everyone's doing something. So they're strong in numbers, but they're almost like a flock of sheep just doing whatever. I think it's something to be cautious of. Maybe it's the right choice for you, but honestly, I think we're going down a weird rabbit hole right now.
Yeah, you're definitely. I was like, you're going down there deep because
Yeah, yeah.
the relationship stuff is extremely powerful. Because honestly, when you look at people, majority of people, especially men, they are happiest when they can provide, when they can serve. So, and sometimes they choose the wrong person to serve. And they are so married to the ideas that they had in front of them that wasn't even real, that they just made up, that they end up all kind of weird things. And I've seen people ending their lives because of illusions that they created. Uh, and essentially, what I hear from you is, because you earlier in the video you mentioned the age, that emotional maturity plays a huge role in all this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so for myself, I would suggest people to read some books. There are great authors like Katie Byron, Mo Gaudat, many others who talk about these things. Basically, how to unwrap your own thinking, because we are all influenced by something. Whatever you think, whatever I think, none of it is our thoughts. It's just the amalgam of whatever influences we've had through the years, molded into something that we think, hey, I came up with this stuff. And when you actually start questioning that, most likely you didn't. You're just married to it because it sounds the most useful for living the way you want to live. And where I'm going with this is there a potential for somebody that you can divert them towards kind of almost creating a community where they maybe try to support each other in a sense, and try to educate each other in a sense? Hey, it may be somebody's hyper focused on weight and you hook up with somebody who isn't, and just, hey, why don't you hang out? learn from each other, those kind of things. Do you think there is a potential for that kind of intervention that could essentially maybe alleviate the stress that people put themselves through just to be in a certain way?
Yeah, I do actually think that, and that's a good idea. And to be fair, I've never considered that recently, but in the past, when I first started coaching, I only had local clients. And I used to have um, a client appreciation Christmas party. One year I had a client appreciation pool party, and it was because I wanted to bring all my clients around and they would all meet each other and they would mingle because they were all going through the same things. And it was actually, I thought it was fine. Actually, I thought it was a pretty good thing. But since then, things have evolved so much that I don't have people coming here in person nearly as often. I still have a few local clients. They'll probably want to be my clients for a lifetime, which is fine with me. Lucky for them, they got grandfathered in at their rate. But I'm now more because of the internet and the way I do things. It's a lot more international now, much more international. So I don't have that same ability to bring them here person. But I've never considered doing some sort of virtual community until you just mentioned that, which might be a good idea because I do think there could be some value in that. People need to be able to talk and express what they're feeling. So like, I think it's good to have like-minded individuals around you. I think you just have to be careful that you don't have the same scenario all the time because then your entire external validation come from the same group again, and then that can become an issue. Like if you're going through whatever you're going through and it's the same people that you're with all the time, then you're associated with them, so that's always going to be a little bit of that same sort of familiarity or association. But I do think that if you had some sort of community group, like I know that you and David have a school group, and I think that's a good idea. And it probably would be helpful because largely from my experience, the guys are too whatever proud or alpha macho whatever to talk, and I think they're just foolish about that idea. But the women largely are all going through the same sort of psychological, physiological, emotional struggles with this stuff. So if they had that camaraderie, I think it would probably be beneficial. I mean, currently it's me. Every check-in, we just do it together. But if they had other people, it would probably be helpful. Um, because essentially what we do, you, I know, myself, David, some of the other good coaches, what we're doing with our clients is not guesswork and it's not made up. It's physiological truth that we know. And unfortunately, when that's the case, it's not sexy, it's not glamorous, and it's not quick. It's creating adaptations that have to be there. Otherwise, you're just going to be fooling yourself and doing unsustainable, extreme approaches to make a quick fix, and then you'll suffer the retaliation, which is inevitable. So, because we're doing that, things are slow, but they're true. And if we can keep people aware of that, they'll stay the course. And if they stay the course, they will succeed. It's not an opinion. I mean, I see it all the time. If my clients follow what they're doing, they succeed every time. And I'm sure yours is the same.
Yeah, the way I compare it is when somebody goes and like, hey, I want to get ready in 2 weeks, and they have never trained in their life. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're almost as a fine-tuned car. If you go from gear 1 to gear 6, you're gonna stall. Not gonna happen.
Mhm.
It's just not gonna
Yeah.
happen. So you need to go through kind of ramping yourself up, preparing yourself for next step, pulling back a little bit. It's like clutch, so to speak, and then get the next gear, next phase, and so on and so forth. And
But you definitely need the tools to succeed and to accomplish the goal. And the tools are going to vary for everybody for sure, but they have to be understood because you can't skip steps. If you're jumping over important processes, you're fooling yourself and your body will catch you. It's just a matter of time. So you have to have the processes in play. And if people understand them, if they don't seem so daunting and they don't seem like, God, this is going to take, 50 years to accomplish, because you have to be finding the milestones along the way to keep that progress going. But what I want to do is give clients the abilities to accomplish their goal in a sustainable fashion and not rebound in some negative way to the point where it derails them emotionally, psychologically, or physiologically. So that's sort of always been my goal. And when that is my goal, your goal will dictate the timeline. And if your goal is I want to be the fucking number one fighter in the world, well, we're working on this for years, not 6 months. And I'm working with a world champ, a couple of them actually, and one of them, we have a 2-year timeline. So we're building a 2-year plan, not a 6-month plan. And it's the same thing with females. I have a new female, but she's going to approach the bikini stage for the first time. She's already in very good shape. She lives in the States, some sunny state. I forget which one. But her timeline is up to me. She's given me full reign on her timeline. So to me, her timeline now is easily a year, even though from a stage lean point of view, she's only maybe, I don't know, 3 months out. But it's not about how quickly can I get her lean. It's how well can I build these habits into her. So this is lifestyle and there is no rebound and we can continue to make progress and she will do very well. That's my goal. And because she gave me full reins, that's what's going to happen. And I think that's an important thing to consider too. Timeline is very, very important. You can't rush this stuff if you want to do it well and continue to be able to do it.
And do you think there is something that you see in a sense of like a mindset that there are some phases that people need to go through to truly accept that kind of relaxed approach? We both know there was some incident now that probably was influenced through psychological mismanagement that caused physiological interventions that sadly ended up with loss of life. So could that have been prevented if that very young person had gone through a couple of stages of just setting herself up to not being obsessed of how she looks at all times?
Yeah, I think it for sure could have been prevented. I absolutely think that, but I don't know the details. I know what topic you're talking about. I don't know the details of what led to that. I know apparently the outcome of it, and that falls right in line with what I see all the time. It's extreme approaches because they want to look the part or feel like they look the part around their environment. And oftentimes, especially in the bodybuilding community, they're just using aggressive drug approaches. And with men, it's almost even worse. That they just take more drugs, take more drugs, take more drugs. I don't agree with that approach. I'm trying to get people to take less things, not more things. I would rather you didn't need anything. I'm not foolish or delusional. I know to be at the top of your game, there's going to be things being needed, but I don't think they need to be excessive like what we see. Like literally, I had a client yesterday say, "Hey, this guy's transformation was this, and he did it in 6 months, and this is the first time he ever used drugs, and he's using 2 grams." I'm like, well, yeah, he did an extreme transformation, and wait till you see what his aftermath will be when he comes off of his 2 grams, never touching the stuff before. He's going to be a psychological disaster. And it's just a matter of time. And I don't think that's the right approach. But if he just wanted to hit that transformation picture, he did it. Congratulations. If that was his end goal of life, then he did it. But if it's not, he's going to go through a whirlwind of shit in the next little while.
I see people like that falling apart and then turning into those people who are just, this is really bad for your health and you should never do this. And I'm like,
Yep.
anything that if you're doing like a moron is bad.
Yep. Exactly.
Like you can know everything. I'll try to wrap it up and let you go. I know you're got your client coming up in a couple of minutes. So essentially, the journey to being healthier physically definitely will take a lot of toll on you mentally, and understanding that there are few steps that might be more rigid at beginning and need to be relaxed at the end for the sake of long-term health is just inevitable. You either need to accept that you need to grow into a bigger person and not be so vain, and maybe rein yourself in at some stage of the year and then be more relaxed later. But if you're only rigid all the time, you're going to pay for it physically, not just mentally.
I think so. Yeah, there's definitely more to life than just how you look. I know that sounds stupid, but I mean, especially with social media. But I mean, the people that I coach that are 100% focused on how they look, they seem to be some of the most unhappy people.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you, and I'll see you next video.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.